It would seem that the USSR was a country of science, atheism, and strict logic. Officially, no mysticism, God, psychics, and other conspiracies. But behind closed doors, in the depths of special laboratories and classified institutes, there were experiments that more resemble the script of a science fiction film. Why did a country that did not believe in religion suddenly start investing millions of rubles in the study of telepathy, clairvoyance, hypnosis, and even UFOs? The answer is simple: fear and competition. In the 1960s, the CIA suddenly learned that the USSR was spending more on paranormal research than on some satellite programs. By comparison, it cost millions of dollars to launch a single satellite. And here, even more money is spent on researching thought forces and remote influence on humans. Soviet generals and scientists were afraid that the Americans would create weapons capable of mind control, so they decided to act first. The race began. Only not a space race, but a mental one. Dozens of institutes were created in the USSR, where psychics, hypnotists, clairvoyants, and even those who called themselves sorcerers sat next to scientists. These people were not just trained, they were given real government tasks to find missing people, spies, to influence the behavior of enemies, and even to transmit information by the power of thought across thousands of kilometers. For example, one of the institutes in Novosibirsk conducted experiments in which a psychic had to guess what a KGB officer was holding in his hand while in another city. According to the documents, it was called Experiment on Signal Transmission by Non-Material Means. Does that sound wild? But despite its ostensible rigor and scientificity, the Soviet system was willing to believe anything if it could be used against the enemy. While ordinary people were told that psychics don't exist, the state was secretly training and using them in the service of the homeland. In the 70s, the KGB began seriously studying telepathy, the transmission of thoughts at a distance. This was not talk at the level of interesting theories, but real experiments under the cover of top secret. The authorities wanted to get a weapon that could not be seen, not heard, and could not be defended against. What could be more dangerous than a person who can read your thoughts or control your mind? One of the most discussed experiments took place in the mid-70s. A telepath who was in Moscow was given a task to see where a Soviet submarine, which had gone on a mission to the ocean, was located. He described a point on the map, and a few days later it turned out that the boat was really in that area. Coincidence? Perhaps. But it was enough for the KGB to allocate new money for the development of telepathic research. These programs were kept completely secret. Participants were forced to sign non-disclosure documents, and some of the material is still classified. In some closed military units, whole groups were created where people with unusual abilities were selected. They were trained like special agents, only not for physical combat, but for psychic warfare. The boundaries between science and mysticism were blurred when it came to state security. The main thing was the result, and the methods could be any. In the Soviet Union, it was forbidden to even say the word UFO out loud. Officially, it was all fantasy, bourgeois fiction, not our method. But in fact, thousands of reports, dozens of secret archives, and entire military units, which were instructed to record and study the appearance of unknown objects in the sky. The most interesting thing is that as soon as the army encountered something that could not be explained, it was immediately classified and sent upstairs to the Ministry of Defense, to the KGB, to special laboratories of the Academy of Sciences. One such document, later found in military archives, describes an incident that occurred at a missile base in Uzbekistan. An unknown object hovered over the territory, silently. No noise, it just hovered, and at that moment all the equipment at the base switched off. Instruments stopped working, engines stalled, and several soldiers suddenly got nosebleeds. The object disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared. It's an official record. There were many such reports, and almost all of them never made it to the press. It was all handled by the Secret Service, especially if the incident took place near military facilities, which was quite often. At the end of the 70s, a special group of scientists and officers was created under the Ministry of Defense, whose task was to collect information about unusual aerial phenomena, especially in the areas of strategic facilities, nuclear bases, military training grounds, radar stations. Many military officers reported, when approaching such objects, the devices began to malfunction. People had unexplainable sensations, from fear to nausea. Some lost consciousness. Equipment would go dead. Communication disappeared. All this was recorded in service logs. But the strange thing is, nobody knew exactly what they were dealing with. It could be spy vehicles, natural phenomena, or something else entirely. The USSR didn't just study UFOs, it viewed them as a potential threat to national security. The reaction was the same as to the appearance of an enemy missile. Against the background of official silence, a whole network of secret science developed within the system to try to understand who they were, where they came from, and what they wanted. When the military encountered something that could not be explained, whether it was a hovering object, equipment shutdowns, or strange symptoms in soldiers, not only engineers and physicists, but also those who feel more than usual were often called in to help. It all started with sporadic consultations, but very quickly it became clear psychics and mediums can be useful to the system, especially when conventional methods don't work. In a country where neither God nor the beyond was officially believed in, psychics suddenly began to receive state assignments. Yes, the very ones who used to be called charlatans. They were given access to classified information, brought to the Kremlin, connected to the work of the special services, and all this not for show or spectacular stunts. They were tasked with finding spies, missing people, lost documents, and even predicting the behavior of foreign leaders. Some psychics were specially trained, how to work with photographs, how to read a person by objects, how to influence the interlocutor at a distance. They were given tasks, the results of which were recorded, analyzed, and turned out to be unexpectedly accurate. Some of those who took part in these experiments later confessed. They felt they were not helpers, but tools. They were used and thrown away. Many people still think that if experiments with telepaths, UFOs, and psychotronic weapons had really been conducted in the USSR, they would have been told about it long ago. But this was not the case. These projects were so well hidden that even many members of the security services did not know what their colleagues were actually doing. The secrecy was maximum. All documents related to anomalous programs were marked with the following stamps: top secret, not subject to publicity, special folder. Some of them remain closed even today, despite the fact that the USSR has long since collapsed. Those who participated in closed projects signed non-disclosure documents for 25, 50, and even 75 years. Violation was a criminal offense. Some then simply refused to discuss these topics, even with their families. In the Soviet media, there were no such topics at all. No TV programs, no articles, no interviews. If even rumors appeared, they were quickly silenced, explaining everything with natural reasons or simply ridiculed. If even after 40 years some of the documents on these topics are classified, it means that there is something in them that may raise questions in the public even today. Too incredible to be true. Telepaths, psychotronic weapons, UFOs, clairvoyance in the service of the KGB. It is logical to ask, what if all this is a mass illusion? Maybe just the excesses of the era and the fantasies of the military. But here is what is interesting. Even after the collapse of the USSR, when the archives began to be partially opened, some former employees of the special services said bluntly, "Yes, these projects existed. Yes, there were results. It's just that they are not told about them." And this is no longer speculation. The United States began its paranormal research only after learning about the Soviet developments. This is officially recognized. The Stargate program in the US is a direct reaction to what was being done in the USSR. The Americans were afraid of falling behind in something they didn't understand. So they started copying the approach. So it's definitely not an invention of individual enthusiastic scientists. It was part of a global game between the superpowers. What do you think about it? Write in the comments.